Hey, what's up guys? Books Nelson here, back with another video, and today we're going to be talking about a different topic. So with the release of the most recent 2K news, we have Jason Tatum and Asia Wilson sharing a cover, and there's a lot of speculation that there will be female MyCAREER players, right, to go alongside with the typical male MyCAREER players. And I wanted to discuss that topic for a few reasons. One, I think it affects pretty much everyone if it were to happen or if it doesn't happen, right? Obviously, many gamers want to see that. But I think very often when we have this conversation, it is about what's deserved and what's right or wrong. And the thing is, we don't discuss anything in the game that way, really, right? It's more about, is this what the players want? And will this make the game better? Not necessarily who deserves what, right? And I say that because I think to give the best of this concept, you have to have the discussion the same way you have the discussion about anything else in the game. So with that being said, there's a few things I want to do right at the beginning before we get into this. And we are going to get right into this discussion. But first of all, this is not about what I personally want. I will discuss my personal opinion as a gamer, as a fan of basketball games, what I would want to see, but I don't want that to be what this discussion is. We're doing what we always do. We're elevating the conversation, and we're talking about the pros, the cons, and the details of what it would look like if this were to happen, and if that is ultimately the best thing to do. And another thing we want to do is to get the sexism argument out of the way. Obviously, hot button topic. I know I'm a little clickbaity with my title, right? It's perfectly fine, but this is not about necessarily men versus women and that sort of thing. That's a factor, but that's not what we're doing. We're talking about the actual nuts and bolts of this conversation. Okay, so when we say, is it good for the game? This has a lot of meanings, right? But it's also, is it good for the majority of female hoops fans? Now, I asked that question not to represent female hoops fans myself, but because I know that when companies talk about this sort of thing, it's something they have to think about. And up until now, the WNBA has really been struggling. But with Caitlin Clark, along with other factors, I think there are other things that have contributed to this. People like to say it's only Caitlin. I think Caitlin is the galvanizing force at the end of it. But I do think there are a lot of things that are leading up to the increasing popularity and success of the WNBA. So with that being said, you actually have two important groups to consider when you talk about quote unquote female hoops fans, right? Because you have the female players, the women players and girl players who play NBA 2K right now, right? And then you have women and girls who are fans of the WNBA. And no question, of course, there are men who are fans of the WNBA. And of course, there are men who would like to play with a female MyCAREER player, right? Just like they would in any video, they'd also like to play Lara Croft, right? Let's not be weird, guys, right? Let's be adult about this conversation. So the thing is, when the 2K community, which is predominantly male, wants something, we talk about, is it good for the sim community? Is it good for the park community? Is it good for the comp community? What about the offline players? But then when we go to the WNBA, we go, is it good for women? And I think that's not doing women any favors, right? And we're going to revisit that particular point as we go through some of the arguments and ideas. Because I think what happens is when people really want something or they feel like they deserve something, and by the way, this happens in every 2K community, they just want it in the game. And they don't care how it affects other people, whether those people agree with them or disagree with them or part of different communities in the game. They don't care how it affects other people. They don't care how it affects the game. They just want it, right? They just want it in the game. And we don't discuss things like that here on this channel. We actually get into the nuts and bolts of why certain things work, why certain things don't work, and so on and so forth. So I think now with the popularity of the WNBA, it was already a factor that with the partnership of the NBA is going to demand of 2K a certain level of care and representation towards that league. Now that the league is starting to do much better, the NBA is going to even more want to care about that league. Why do I keep talking about the WNBA in this My Career business? Because there are basically two paths that you can go when talking about a female My Career player. And by the way, my team people, we will be talking about this in my team as well. But when you talk about a female player in My Career, there's two paths. There's one where she does it exactly like the guys, right? You go through the WNBA. You have also Park Quest. That is a valid version of that. But you also have your NBA Quest where you can farm your VC, right? You can work on your badges. You can go through the storyline. I know it hasn't seen its best days in recent years, but many people still enjoy and play that mode. And then you take that character once you're done out into the online world and you compete. Now, here's the thing. If you were to do that and you were to have the character be a version that is viable for the park and the rec center and the pro-am, well, now the WNBA player that you're making is outside of, and you actually see it on the screen right now, she's outside of the actual general archetypes of the players in the WNBA. And if you talk to WNBA players or you watch interviews with women hoopers and WNBA players, and a lot of times guys will say stuff like, well, to make it more entertaining, why don't you essentially make it more like the guys' game or give it the opportunity? Maybe smaller court, shorter quarters, lower rims. And women all usually get upset about this point because their point is our game is good enough, right? Serena Williams doesn't need dramatically different circumstances, right? What do you call it? Amanda Nunes doesn't need dramatically different circumstances. Yeah, there might be some slight adjustment to the rules, but overall it's mostly the same game. Same way WNBA, shorter games, right? Smaller ball, but essentially the same game. They don't want these dramatic changes to manufacture something basically saying the game they have is not good enough. They believe in their game. So what happens is, if it's going to be just like the male My Career, this one argument we hear a lot is, it's just video games, it's fantasy mode, right? You can do whatever you want. It's fantasy mode. I heard one thing recently, L2 canceling doesn't happen in real life. I don't think that was an intentional design decision, number one. But number two, it's not about everything in the game being realistic, but there are boundaries influenced by realism that enhance the simulation, right? And so if you're going to enhance the simulation of the WNBA, would it enhance that simulation if ultimately you can make a character that has the power of LeBron James in the WNBA simulation? See, in the My Career, the archetypes or the builder, it binds your character to the extremes at all of the ends, right? So you can make Steph Curry, but not if he's too tall. You can make Giannis Antetokounmpo, but not if he dribbles too well, right? And so on and so forth. The bigger you are, the more you're limited in some ways. The better you shoot, the more you're limited in other ways. And the way that they limit it are bound by actual real life NBA players, roughly loosely, to the point that in the builder, they have started adding the builds of the NBA players in the builders. So if we look at the female side of it, if they were to do that, how are you going to say, oh, I can build Kelsey Plum or Ja Morant, right? Like, it's obviously there's a difference there that is doing the opposite of what WNBA players and representatives have said that they want, which is a faithful representation of the WNBA game, right? So if you are going to respect the WNBA game and have the WNBA have a viable My Career path, that doesn't translate directly into having a character that is competitively viable in the male My Career path, right? So let's go the opposite direction. What would it look like if you're like, well, forget the WNBA, I just want a female character that I can play in the park? Now, the simple way to do that is the same way you have a burly build, right? The same way you have a slender build and all of those options. One of the options would just be a female option, and it'd just be a female skin on a male character. Now, one could argue that this is not investing into the women's game. This is just giving them kind of a superficial thing. You can almost liken it to, when your little cousin comes over to play and you just hand them a controller that's not plugged in so they feel like they're playing, right? The women didn't actually get a game mode that is respecting the real life human beings that are increasing in celebrity status and raising the popularity of the WNBA. You're not actually reflecting and respecting their game. You're saying, screw all that. Here's a skin just so you can feel like you're involved. Now, am I entirely poo-pooing that? I actually am not. I do think that there are many gamers, period. Not just female gamers, but I think male gamers as well, who would be happy with the option of a female skin just to switch it up, and they'd find it fun, and they'd find it funny to have 7-foot tall women dunking on people, and it would be a blast, right? And I'm not saying to do that or not to do that. I'm saying that's not the same thing as giving the female side of the game the same benefits and investment and quality as the male side of the game. You're talking about a completely cosmetic thing. Is that entirely bad or good? I'm just presenting the pathways that this stuff should happen. Now, if there was a WNBA MyCAREER path, there are other issues with that as well, because as it is right now, if people are fans of the WNBA MyCAREER mode, and you see here, I literally did sit down and capture this video footage for an hour. And if you saw the thumbnail, I literally did sit there and make that fake Caitlin Clark card for you guys for the thumbnail. So I invested into this, guys. I want to have a real conversation. I don't want to simplify this into, men good, women bad, men good, women bad. That's not the conversation we're having. We're talking about how this would actually happen so that we can be honest about what we're asking for. Now, I think the skins option pleases players who already play MyCAREER, whether they be male or female, who just want to see a female character model. But does that serve all of the women and girls who are falling in love with the WNBA right now? Are we willing to disregard and dismiss them when they look at the male MyCAREER and say, I want that, right? I want that. I want to be able to go through an awesome story. Not that it's an awesome story right now, but I want to go through an awesome story. I want to go through an awesome quest. I want to build up my character, and then I want to play that character online, right? Are we honoring that? And if we do honor that, if they do that right now, the mode is free. In fact, you gain VC from playing the mode. But if you put it in with the rest of the park and the MyCAREER, let's keep it a buck, is another problem, right? So either A, you have to heavily monetize the female side of the MyCAREER stuff, the WNBA, or you don't monetize it and it becomes a cheat code because you can say, well, I'll just make a WNBA character. I don't have to pay for my character, right? I can just, do all of that basically for free, because without the monetization, the character development is going to be much faster, because 2K is not going to make the mode miserable if they're not extracting VC out of you. It's actually much more like older MyCAREERs, where you can just go in, your overall is not absurdly low. In fact, if you want to see how 2K is nickel and diming the MyCAREER community, come over here, look at the WNBA thing, you see the footage in the background, and look at how much easier it is to actually go through it and develop and create a character and go through the mode without them trying to torture you into spending VC, right? So on the flip side, you're saying, hey, instead of coming in here and this being a little bit more like the old MyCAREER, where you could just come in and plug and play and have fun, we're inviting you to this predatory monetization that all of the regular MyCAREER people are already suffering with, and that's your entry fee to this fairness and playing with us. And again, I'm not judging. I'm not saying if that's right or wrong. I'm just presenting a realistic scenario, because there's no way 2K is going to allow the WNBA to be a loophole into creating a MyCAREER character for either nothing or for much cheaper, right? And we just have to be realistic about that. So what's the right path? What's the wrong path? So number one, I think when it comes to MyCAREER, first of all, I think the WNBA mode needs to improve more. The fact of the matter is, there probably aren't a lot, not even there probably, let's be real. There's not a lot of people playing the mode, which limits how much resources they can put into the mode. We've seen the complaints about female character models, the uniforms are terrible. 2K's approach to female body types, as a person who draws women for a living, it's awful. Their art directors need to get on top of their game. It's just not done well. The women are not faithfully represented at all. So the mode just needs to improve overall. And I think one of those improvements that can make the mode feel a lot better and start this future of seeing, can we make the WNBA MyCAREER viable on its own, right? And I don't think that's denying women the opportunity, blah, blah, blah. I think that's actually, for many women, the same way on my channel, I say there's a lot of people in different situations. I think a lot of women, especially as the WNBA gets more popular, are fans of the WNBA, and they would like that game to be better. And it does need improvement. But one of the things they can do is allow them to go into the city. First of all, they should be able to go into the city and go to the clothing shops and go get their tattoos and do that part of the game the same way as the men. I do think they should have courts that are WNBA players or female MyCAREER players only. Maybe even a place in the park that's for them, right? For those players. In fact, I think in stage, if you think this is like a sexist idea, which I think is ridiculous, but in stage, a lot of stage wagers have a no post scorers rule because they don't want to play guards versus post scorers. This is just a version of that, right? Which is something they're actually asking for. So they should have a place in the stage that's from female MyCAREER players. They should have a place in the theater for female MyCAREER players. They should be able to navigate the city and enjoy the vehicles and get all of the clothes and all of that stuff, right? And enjoy the brands and spend their VC on their characters to make their characters look as much like their vision as they want to. I think that's something that they could start doing now to improve this mode and bring it closer to the male side of the mode. And I say this because, and here's where my personal view comes into it a little bit, I actually think there is a great reason to have a female MyCAREER mode separate from the male mode. As you guys look on the screen, you notice something real different. With these much smaller characters, the court is much bigger. And that makes the gameplay way different because you can't hawk passing lanes. You can't rotate as dishonestly. Like when you have 7 foot tall characters with 70 speed and 87 block and 85 vert running and jumping across the court, it makes the game harder to play. And my team people know this. When height creep comes in and all the cards start getting really tall, it gets really difficult to make certain shots. Now, because of their ratings, shot percentages go up for different reasons. But in terms of honest defense, the game becomes much more arcadey and much more dishonest of a game because the square button and the triangle button now are more important than positioning. Whereas if you look at the spacing of the WNBA mode, you can't play that way because you'll be thrown out of position. And I actually think, and call me crazy, I actually think there are a lot of simhead gamers that if the WNBA mode was better developed, they would actually like the gameplay of it more because a lot of what they dislike comes when the players get too overpowered for one reason or another. All right? So wanted to talk about that argument, and let's piggyback that onto my team for a moment. So the argument that's given to when people just want, female MyCAREER players, they don't care how it happens, is, well, it's a video game. You can do anything you want in a video game, right? It's the same argument they use when they're like, oh, well, in this cartoon, that guy lifted a car, so now there's no rules. I think that's ridiculous. As a person who literally makes comic books, that's not how we do things. That's not how you create things. You create a new world with rules, and usually those rules are mostly similar to our world with some exaggeration at the edges. It's not a world of no rules. You know what is a world with a lot less rules? My team, right? Shaq has a 3-ball on my team. Steph Curry has a 99 defense in my team as of right now. So even though the thumbnail to this video says this isn't a good idea, I actually don't. That's just for the thumbnail. I am being a bit of a YouTuber. I apologize, but and I'm having fun with that. But I actually do think in my team, the WNBA players can flourish and they can do what I feel like 2K can even do a better job of, which is basically give the SIGs and the stats to the WNBA players earlier in the year, because we know eventually the whole team is going to be Kareem, Wemby, right? Sean Bradley, Bobo. That's going to be everybody's team at the end of the year. But between the launch of the game and the end of the year, small point guards are more effective, right? More imbalanced cards that are really good at defense but not so great at offense are effective. And even though I do think eventually the women would get dark matters and stuff like that, where they would have the stats, just like Allen Iverson in the game right now, the female players wouldn't be meta. Now, if you want to play them for fun, sure. But the point being, you would get that exaggerated funhouse mirror version of the WNBA players the same way you would the NBA players. And early in the year, I wouldn't be shocked if you had one male center, so you had your 7-footer, and then the other 4 players in the starting lineup are WNBA players. And maybe they're smaller, and maybe their physical stats aren't as good, but their shooting stats and their SIGs are way better. And it becomes a styles makes fights situation and does become an interesting kind of fantasy mode of the WNBA players being involved in this, alternate reality that is MyTEAM, whether women are in it or not. MyTEAM is an alternate reality, right? And I think they can integrate that basically immediately. I think next year they can just start bringing in WNBA cards early on, give them the cool SIGs early on to make them more balanced and more viable, so that even a 5'9", 5'10" WNBA guard early in the year, there's a reason to play that character, right? So for MyTEAM, I think the WNBA players are actually a really good idea that you can implement right now. For MyCAREER, I think it's way more complicated than people think about. And it goes beyond just throwing female skins onto male characters. And I think, and this is something people don't talk about a lot, but I do think about it as an artist. Women animate differently than men. And I think if you're going to be faithful to the female characters, right, and the women who play the game, they should look and play and animate the way the women do. Women have different skeletons and muscular structure than men, right? Again, I do anatomy for a living. I could literally teach you guys a class on that. And I'm not saying that to show off. I'm saying that when you just put and this is when any game that does this, when you just put a female skin onto a male character model with the male animations and stuff like that, it's just low effort, low quality. And I don't think we should be arguing for more low effort, low quality because we're so eager to give women a participation trophy in MyCAREER in 2K. I think it's best to develop this thing properly, extract as much value out of the WNBA as possible, honor the WNBA as possible. On the MyTEAM side, integrate that and get that involvement up as soon as possible. And on the MyCAREER side, try to do that intelligently, because I think there's a genuine choice to be made between a separate MyCAREER for women, or are there archetypes in MyCAREER that fit women characters that are somewhat viable versus male characters, right? Because there are male characters that there's balances, right? Every character is not as fast as every character doesn't shoot as well, every character is not as tall. And so can you slide in some WNBA archetypes into that scale and have them be viable? I do think that's a worthy conversation, but I don't think it's as simple as the cosmetic solution that a lot of people are looking for. So let me know what you guys think about this very controversial topic. I'd say don't cancel me, but if you're determined to cancel me for my opinions in this video, that certainly wouldn't stop you anyway. But I hope that you guys listen to this with an honest ear so that we can continue to elevate the conversation and come up with real solutions to develop a great game for fans of women's basketball and the WNBA, and also fans of 2K who want to play with female character models and have that vision be represented well also. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Let me know what you think. Peace.